You believe you understand darkness? You're wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not imprecise in your terminology or fuzzy in the details. You are fundamentally mistaken about what darkness is. And this error, which you have never thought to question, shapes how you perceive threat, approach problems, and spend your energy. It determines battles you fight that cannot be won, precisely because there is nothing to fight. Consider a simple question. You are in a room. A single candle burns on the table. You extinguish it. What enters the room? Your instinct answers immediately. Darkness enters. Darkness fills the space. Darkness rushes in to occupy the void left by departed light. You feel this happen. The sudden change, the pressing weight of blackness against your eyes. But examine this answer carefully. If darkness entered the room, from where did it come? Was it waiting outside the door, gathered beneath the threshold, pressed against the windows? When the flame died, by what mechanism did this darkness travel inward? At what speed? Along what paths? The questions reveal their own absurdity. Nothing entered the room, because nothing exists to enter. The light departed, and what remained was not the arrival of something new, but the absence of what had been. Darkness did not fill the space. The space simply ceased to be illuminated. This is not wordplay. This is the difference between existence and non-existence. The error begins in language. Listen to how we speak of darkness. It falls at evening, gathers in corners, fills empty spaces, presses upon us, creeps through forests, swallows the land. Each verb describes action, but action requires an actor, something that performs the action. What performs the action of falling? What gathers? What fills? Nothing, literally nothing. We have grammatically assigned agency to absence. We speak of darkness as though it were a substance with properties, a force with direction, an entity with intent. Our language embeds a lie so complete that we absorb it before we can think to question it. The child learns to say, "Darkness is coming," before she can analyze what the sentence means. The phrase seems as natural as, "The rain is coming," or "The wind is coming." But rain is something, water droplets falling from clouds. Wind is something, air molecules in motion. Darkness is not something. It is the word we use for no light here. And therefore, every sentence that treats darkness as agent is, upon analysis, incoherent. Darkness does not fall at evening. The earth rotates until your position no longer faces the sun, and light departs. Darkness does not fill a cellar. Light simply does not reach there. Darkness does not press against your eyes. Your eyes receive nothing, and you name that reception seeing darkness. You have spent your entire life speaking nonsense about nothing, and because everyone around you speaks the same nonsense, it never occurred to you to notice. But surely, you might object, the experience of darkness is real. When the candle dies, something changes. Something happens to you. You feel different. If darkness is nothing, why does its arrival affect you so profoundly? Here is the subtle error. You are conflating the experience of darkness with the existence of darkness. Your experience is real. When light departs, your pupils dilate, straining to capture whatever illumination remains. Your other senses sharpen. Hearing grows acute. Touch grows sensitive. As your body compensates for lost vision, your pulse quickens slightly. Your alertness heightens. Millions of years of ancestors who survived by fearing what they could not see have bequeathed you this inheritance. The experience is vivid, embodied, undeniable. But the cause of this experience is deprivation, not presence. When you plunge your hand into cold water, you feel something. But the cold is not a substance entering your hand. It is heat leaving your hand. The experience is real. Its interpretation is erroneous. The same principle applies to darkness. You experience the loss of light, the deprivation of visual information, the vulnerability of reduced perception. You then interpret this experience as the presence of something you call darkness. The experience is coherent. The interpretation is false. Consider this thought experiment. You are tasked with constructing an instrument to detect the arrival of darkness, not to detect the absence of light. That would be a light meter reading 0, but to detect the positive presence of this substance called darkness. What would such an instrument measure? In what units would it report? When darkness fills a room, how many units of darkness occupy each cubic space? When darkness is thicker in one corner than another, what property differs? Attempt to design this instrument. Attempt to specify what it would detect. You will find the task impossible, not because we lack sufficiently advanced technology, but because there is nothing to detect. An instrument can only measure what exists. Darkness does not exist. It is the name we give to the condition when light, which does exist, is absent. The impossibility of the instrument reveals the impossibility of darkness as a phenomenon, whence it follows that you have spent your life in a peculiar form of error, treating nothing as something, and then wondering why your interactions with it produce no result. You have feared darkness, but there is nothing there to fear. You have fought darkness, but there is nothing there to fight. You have spoken of darkness entering, filling, pressing, gathering, but nothing has entered, filled, pressed, or gathered. Every verb was wasted on an empty referent. This matters practically. When you believe darkness is a force, you attempt to combat it as a force. You fortify against it. You build walls. You cower. You devote tremendous energy to defense rather than illumination. You exhaust yourself in phantom combat. The physician who spends his effort cataloguing diseases rather than understanding health commits this error. The moralist who enumerates sins rather than cultivating virtue commits this error. The reformer who fights injustice without providing justice commits this error. Each mistakes absence for presence, then attempts to manipulate what does not exist. We shall see, before this hour concludes, that the only rational response to absence is provision of what is absent. You cannot push back darkness. You can only provide light. You cannot extract ignorance. You can only supply knowledge. You cannot defeat cold. You can only furnish heat. But first, we must deepen the demonstration. For you may accept that darkness does not enter rooms while still believing it can be projected from objects. Surely shadows are something. Place your hand between a candle and a wall. A shadow appears, the dark silhouette of your hand printed upon the surface. Move your hand, the shadow moves. Spread your fingers, the shadow spreads. It seems obvious what is happening. Your hand is projecting darkness onto the wall, just as the candle projects light. This is precisely backwards. Your hand emits nothing. Nothing travels from your hand to the wall to create that shadow. The shadow is not a projection. It is an interception. Light travels from the candle toward the wall. Your hand blocks a portion of that light. The shadow is simply the region where light does not arrive. Nothing was projected. Something was prevented. This distinction transforms how we understand causation. The shadow does not exist because your hand creates it. The shadow exists because your hand prevents what would otherwise have been there. The shadow is a map of absence, a record of where light was blocked, drawn in the medium of non-arrival. Test this principle. Place a second candle at a different angle. The shadow shrinks. Now, if shadows were projections, if your hand were emitting darkness the way the candle emits light, then adding more light could not reduce the shadow. You would have two competing projections, light from the candles, darkness from your hand. The darkness would persist wherever your hand pointed, regardless of how much light arrived from other directions. But that is not what happens. The shadow shrinks because the second candle provides light to regions previously blocked. Where light now arrives, the description shadow no longer applies. There is nothing to resist, nothing to overcome, nothing to push back. The light simply arrives, and the absence, which was never anything but absence, is dissolved. From which it appears, adding light reduces shadow, not by overpowering it, but by providing what it lacked. You cannot fight shadow, you can only provide light. The operations are not symmetrical. Consider the properties of shadows more carefully. Why are some shadows sharp and others fuzzy? Why does a shadow's edge blur when the light source is close and sharpen when the source is distant? If shadows were projections of darkness, these properties would require explanation in terms of darkness itself, some quality of the shadow that varies under different conditions. But there is no such quality, because there is no shadow substance to possess qualities. The explanation lies entirely in light. A candle flame has perceptible size. Light rays emanate from every point on the flame, traveling outward in all directions. When your hand intercepts these rays, some portions of the flame are blocked entirely, some are blocked partially, and some are not blocked at all. The region where all rays are blocked is the dark core of the shadow, the umbra. The region where some rays are blocked but others arrive is the fuzzy edge, the penumbra. The gradient from dark to light is not a mixture of darkness and light, but simply a gradient in light, from none to some to full. Move the candle closer. Its angular size increases relative to your hand, and more rays reach around your hand's edges. The penumbra widens, the shadow softens. Move the candle farther. Its angular size decreases, approaching a point source. Fewer rays reach around your hand's edges. The penumbra narrows, the shadow sharpens. All shadow properties are light properties in disguise. There is no independent phenomenon called shadow with its own characteristics. There is only light, behaving according to geometry, and the absence of light where geometry forbids its arrival. Attempt now to manipulate a shadow directly. You wish to sharpen the shadow. What operation can you perform on the shadow itself to achieve this? You cannot paint it sharper, cut it sharper, or compress it sharper. Every method that succeeds works by modifying the light, using a smaller source, a more distant source, a more collimated beam. The shadow sharpens because light's geometry changes, not because anything was done to the shadow. You wish to move the shadow left. You cannot push it, drag it, or carry it. You can only reposition the light source or the blocking object. The shadow moves as a consequence of changes in light's arrangement, not as a result of any operation performed on shadow itself. You wish to eliminate the shadow entirely. You cannot sweep it away, scrub it clean, or dissolve it in solution. You can only provide light from all angles so that no region remains blocked. When light arrives everywhere, the shadow vanishes, not because it was defeated, but because it was never anything to defeat. This is the diagnostic test for absence. Every attempt to act upon it directly fails. If you can only affect something by affecting something else, you are dealing with absence, not presence. The failure is not technical, not a limitation of current methods that future methods might overcome. The failure is categorical. There is nothing there to act upon. Imagine you could physically isolate a shadow. You reach down, carefully grasp the dark shape on the floor, and lift it for examination. What would you hold? Attempt to describe its weight, its texture, its color, its temperature. You cannot, because you would be holding nothing. The shadow has no existence independent of the light whose absence it represents. Remove the light arrangement that creates the shadow, and the shadow is not orphaned. It simply ceases to be the correct description of that region. The shadow is not a thing. It is a word we use to describe where light is not. This understanding has immediate practical consequence. Many spend their lives attempting to cast out shadows, to project light, not merely to illuminate, but to fight the darkness, to push back the encroaching shadow, to defeat some enemy presence. But there is no enemy presence. The shadow is not encroaching. It is merely the description of where light has not yet reached. The candle does not fight the shadow. The candle simply shines. And in shining, it accomplishes what no amount of fighting could accomplish, because there was never anything to fight. When you understand this, truly understand it, not merely acknowledge it verbally, you will stop wasting energy on combat against phantoms. You will redirect that energy toward provision. And provision, unlike combat against nothing, actually works. But to complete this understanding, we must establish what light actually is. We have spent 2 chapters learning what darkness is not. It is time to learn what light is. Light appears simple. The sun shines, the room brightens, the candle burns, the page becomes visible. Light seems to be one thing, undifferentiated brightness that either is or is not present. When asked, what color is sunlight? Most answer, white or yellow, or simply no color. It's just light. All of these answers are wrong. White light is not simple. It is not one thing. It is a heterogeneous mixture of differently refrangible rays, a compound of many lights traveling together, each with its own distinct properties, its own behavior when bent through glass, its own identity that persists through transformation. Take a beam of sunlight. Admit it through a small aperture into a darkened room, a narrow shaft of white brilliance cutting through the dimness. Place a triangular piece of glass, a prism, in its path. What emerges on the other side is not white. The beam spreads and separates into the colors of the spectrum: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Each color follows its own path, bending at its own angle, maintaining its own identity. This is not the prism adding color to colorless light. This is the prism revealing what was always present. The colors existed within the white beam all along, traveling together, mixed but not merged. The prism separates what was already there. Light is not one thing. It is many things, traveling as one. Now perform the completion of the experiment. Place a second prism, inverted, in the path of the dispersed spectrum. What happens? The colors converge. They bend back toward each other, and from the second prism emerges white light. The light was divided, the light was reunited, and through this division and reunion, its identity persisted, whence it follows that light is something. It has properties that can be examined. It behaves according to law. It can be analyzed and synthesized, taken apart and put back together, like any physical substance. You cannot analyze and synthesize an illusion. You cannot decompose and reconstitute a mere quality. The prism's testimony is existential. Light exists. Now, attempt the same experiment with darkness. Pass darkness through a prism. What emerges on the other side? The question is absurd. There is nothing to pass through, nothing to emerge. Darkness cannot be decomposed because darkness is not composed of anything. Darkness cannot be refracted because refraction requires something to bend. The prism demonstrates light's existence precisely by the impossibility of performing the same demonstration on darkness. This asymmetry is not accidental. It reflects the fundamental difference between something and nothing. Consider what the prism reveals about the nature of color. Before this demonstration, you likely believed that objects create their colors. The apple is red because the apple produces red. The leaf is green because the leaf generates green. The sky is blue because blueness belongs to the sky. But this is not what happens. The apple creates nothing. The leaf generates nothing. The sky possesses no color of its own. All color belongs to light. The apple appears red because light, which contains all colors, strikes the apple's surface, and the apple absorbs every color except red, which it reflects to your eye. The red was in the light all along. The apple merely selected it from the mixture. The leaf appears green, not because it produces green, but because it absorbs reds and blues and reflects the green that was always present in the light. Your entire experience of a colored world is the experience of light's hidden composition being selectively revealed. Every colored surface is a filter, not a generator. The world does not create colors. The world sorts and presents the colors that light has carried from the sun. This transforms how you see the visual world. You are not seeing objects. You are seeing light. What you call the red apple is light that has bounced off the apple. What you call the green field is light that has bounced off grass. What you call my hand is light that has bounced off your skin. Remove light and there is nothing to see. Not because objects vanish, but because seeing requires light to carry information to your eye. Everything visible is light. Darkness is simply where light has not arrived. The prism reveals something else. Light obeys law. Each color bends by a specific amount when passing from air into glass. Red bends least, violet bends most. The intermediate colors bend by intermediate amounts, in perfect order. This is not accident or chaos. It is mathematics made manifest. The angle of bending can be calculated. Given the properties of the glass and the nature of the color, the path of the ray can be predicted with precision. Light behaves lawfully, and lawfulness is the mark of existence. Only what exists can obey rules. Only what has properties can display consistent behavior. Darkness has no laws. There is no law of darkness governing how darkness bends through a prism, because darkness does not bend through prisms, because darkness does not exist. The absence of lawfulness reflects the absence of existence. Observe a rainbow after rainfall. What you witness is the prism demonstration performed by nature. Each water droplet suspended in the air acts as a tiny prism. Sunlight enters, bends, separates into colors, and exits toward your eye. But each color exits at a slightly different angle, and your eye receives red from droplets at one height, orange from droplets at another, and so on through the spectrum. The arc of color you see is geometry made visible, the mathematics of light's behavior painted across the sky. The colors always appear in the same order. Red at the top, violet at the bottom. This is not variable, it is law. The rainbow does not choose its arrangement. It follows the rules that govern how light bends through water. Every rainbow is proof. Proof that light is something real, with properties that can be investigated, behavior that follows rules, nature that persists through transformation. And every region of sky between rainbows, the space where colors do not appear, is not filled with invisible darkness. It is simply where the geometry does not direct colored light toward your eye. The darkness has no presence there. The light simply arrives elsewhere. We have now established the foundation. Light is something, composite, lawful, analyzable, substantial. Darkness is nothing, not composite, not lawful, not analyzable, not substantial. This asymmetry between light and darkness reflects an asymmetry in reality itself. Existence is positive. Non-existence is merely the lack of existence. Presence is real. Absence is merely the lack of presence. But establishing this foundation is not yet mastering its application. We understand what light and darkness are. We must now understand how this principle operates in the detailed mechanics of experience. For there are subtleties that remain, and objections that must be answered. We have established the principle. Now we must master its mechanics. The principle states, light is something, darkness is nothing. All phenomena we attribute to darkness are, upon analysis, phenomena of light. All operations we perform that seem to affect darkness are operations upon light in disguise. But mastering a principle requires applying it to specific cases, discovering its explanatory power, and developing the habit of correct analysis. We must transform theoretical understanding into mechanical fluency. Consider again the shadow. We have established that it is not projected but intercepted, a region where light does not arrive. Now let us examine how this understanding resolves puzzles that would otherwise seem mysterious. Why are some shadows dark and others faint? The common answer would invoke amounts of darkness. More darkness here, less there. But there are no amounts of darkness, because darkness has no quantity. The correct analysis: a shadow is dark when little or no light reaches that region. A shadow is faint when some light reaches it from secondary sources, reflections from walls, from the ground, from other objects. The gradient from dark to faint is a gradient in light quantity, not a gradient in darkness quantity. Examine a shadow on a sunny day. The core may appear quite black, but look carefully. It is not truly black. Some light reaches it, reflected from the sky, from nearby surfaces, from scattered illumination. The shadow is simply less lit than the surrounding area. Dark is a comparative term describing a region that receives less light than its neighbours. In a room with white walls, shadows appear softer, lighter, less stark. In a room with black walls, shadows appear harsher, darker, more absolute. The shadow itself has not changed. The amount of reflected light reaching the shadowed region has changed. All explanation lies in light's behaviour, not in any property of shadow. Why does the sun cast sharper shadows than a cloudy sky? On a clear day, sunlight reaches you from a single direction. The disk of the sun, which despite its enormous true size, appears small from our distance. Light rays travel in nearly parallel paths. When an object intercepts these rays, the boundary between blocked and unblocked is crisp. The shadow is sharp. On a cloudy day, sunlight has been scattered by water droplets throughout the clouds. It reaches you from all directions at once. The entire sky becomes a light source. Light arrives around objects from multiple angles. No crisp boundary exists between blocked and unblocked, because blocking one ray does not block the rays arriving from other directions. The shadow softens, diffuses, sometimes nearly vanishes. The shadow has not become weaker or less substantial. There is no shadow substance to be weakened. Light's geometry has changed from directional to diffuse, and the pattern of light's absence has changed accordingly. The same object blocks the same portion of light, but the same portion of directional light produces a sharp shadow, while the same portion of diffuse light produces a soft one. All explanation lies in light's arrangement. Here is the mechanical test, the diagnostic that reveals when you are dealing with absence rather than presence. Attempt to act upon it directly. You wish to sharpen a shadow. List every method that might succeed. You could move the light source farther away. The shadow sharpens. Operation on light. You could make the light source smaller. The shadow sharpens. Operation on light. You could use a more collimated beam. The shadow sharpens. Operation on light. You could remove reflecting surfaces that soften the shadow. The shadow sharpens. Operation on light by eliminating secondary illumination. Now list any method that operates on the shadow itself. There is no such method. The list is empty. You cannot paint sharpness onto a shadow, inject sharpness into a shadow, or manipulate the shadow directly in any way. Every successful operation works by modifying light's arrangement. This diagnostic reveals ontology, when all operations must be indirect, acting on the corresponding presence rather than the apparent absence. You have confirmed that the apparent absence is genuinely absent. There is nothing there to act upon. Apply this diagnostic more broadly. You wish to reduce the darkness in a room. You cannot sweep darkness out, vacuum it up, or chemically neutralize it. You can only provide light. Every successful method increases light. No successful method directly decreases darkness. You wish to reduce the cold in a room. You cannot sweep cold out or chemically neutralize it. You can only provide heat. Every successful method increases heat. No successful method directly decreases cold. You wish to reduce the silence in a room. You cannot extract silence or transform it. You can only provide sound. Every successful method increases sound. No successful method directly decreases silence. The pattern is universal. Wherever you find that all successful operations are indirect, acting on the positive term rather than the negative, you have found an absence/presence pair, and you have identified which is which. The one you can act upon is real. The one you cannot act upon does not exist. This diagnostic has practical consequence. It reveals where effort is wasted. The man who tries to push back the darkness rather than provide light wastes his effort. His pushing encounters nothing to push. His energy dissipates into the void. Meanwhile, the man who simply lights a candle accomplishes what pushing never could. The reformer who tries to extract poverty from a community rather than provide opportunity wastes her effort. There is no poverty substance to extract. There is only the absence of resources, connections, education, health. Provide the presences, and the absence, which was never anything but absence, dissolves. The teacher who tries to fight ignorance rather than provide knowledge wastes his effort. Ignorance is not an enemy with defenses to breach. Ignorance is the empty space where knowledge has not yet arrived. Fill the space, and the ignorance, which was nothing, becomes something. Understanding. The shift from fighting absence to providing presence is the shift from futile action to effective action. It is not a change in energy expenditure. It is a change in energy direction. The same effort, differently applied, produces categorically different outcomes. One puzzle remains before we can extend the principle further. If darkness does not exist, why does it feel like something? When you enter a dark room, your experience changes profoundly. Something seems to press upon you. Something seems to fill the space. You feel the darkness as presence, not as absence. Surely this feeling is evidence of something real. We must answer this objection before proceeding. Enter a dark room. Notice what happens to you. Your eyes strain, pupils dilating, searching for any scrap of light. Your ears sharpen. Sounds you would normally ignore become prominent. Your skin registers the faint movement of air. Your pulse quickens slightly. Your muscles tense, ready for response to the unseen. You feel something. You might call it the presence of darkness, a weight, a thickness, a quality that fills the space and presses against you. But examine this feeling more carefully. What, precisely, are you sensing? You are sensing lack. Your eyes receive no stimulus. This is not the presence of darkness, but the absence of light. Your other senses heighten because vision has failed them. This is compensation for deprivation, not perception of substance. Your alertness increases because you cannot see potential threats. This is response to vulnerability, not detection of an entity. Every component of your experience is a response to absence, not a perception of presence. The experience is real. Its interpretation is erroneous. The error is ancient and understandable. Our minds evolved to survive, not to philosophize. When light departed and our ancestors could no longer see predators, those who became alert, cautious, and frightened were more likely to survive than those who remained oblivious. We inherited the fear of darkness from countless generations of successful survivors. But the fear was never about darkness. It was about the absence of sight. The child who dreads the dark does not fear darkness as substance. The child fears what might be lurking where she cannot see. She fears the loss of information, the inability to perceive threat, the vulnerability of blindness. The fear is coherent and sensible, but its object is miscategorized. She fears deprivation, not presence. This reframing matters practically. If darkness were a thing, we might combat it by fighting the thing. But since darkness is absence, we cannot combat it directly. The only remedy is provision of what is absent. Give the child a candle, and her fear dissolves, not because the candle defeated an enemy, but because it provided what she lacked, the ability to see. Consider grief. When someone you love departs, you feel a profound presence. The weight of their absence fills rooms, colours, memories, occupies the space where they should be. The feeling is vivid, embodied, undeniable, but the departed person is not present. What you feel is the shape of their absence, the negative space where their presence used to be. Your feeling is real, but it is not perception of something there. It is perception of something missing. The same logic applies to darkness. The feeling is real. The intensity is real. But intensity of feeling does not establish presence of object. We can feel intensely about absences precisely because absences affect us. They deprive us of what we need, leave us vulnerable, disrupt our expectations. The feeling proves the feeling, not the existence of darkness and substance. Imagine you could strip away all interpretation and simply experience what your senses deliver. In darkness, your eyes would report no stimulus received. Your skin would report air temperature, air movement, texture of surfaces contacted. Your ears would report sound waves of such and such frequency and amplitude. None of these reports would include darkness detected. The word darkness does not describe any sensation. It describes the absence of visual sensation. It is a label we apply to the condition of receiving no light, not a thing we perceive. We perceive light. We perceive sound. We perceive touch. We do not perceive darkness, silence, or numbness. We only perceive the absence of perceiving, and we name these absences as though they were perceptions of something. The naming is convenient. It allows us to communicate. It is dark in here, conveys useful information. But convenience of language does not establish existence of referent. We say, the sun rises. Though the sun does not rise, the earth rotates. We say, darkness fills the room. Though nothing fills, light has departed. Language serves communication, not ontology. Do not mistake the words for the world. The most dangerous consequence of this confusion is the wasted effort it generates. When you believe darkness is a presence, you attempt to defend against its approach, resist its pressure, fight its invasion. You mobilize against something that is not there. This is not merely ineffective, it is exhausting. Phantom combat depletes without accomplishing. You spend energy maintaining vigilance against an enemy that cannot attack, defending positions that cannot be assaulted, struggling against pressure that does not exist. Meanwhile, the simple provision of light, which alone is effective, awaits. One candle accomplishes what a lifetime of fighting cannot. Not victory over darkness, but illumination in its place. The shift from fighting to providing is not a change in courage or commitment. It is a change in category. You cease treating absence as enemy and begin treating it as vacuum. Vacuums are not defeated, they are filled. When you fill a vacuum, it is no longer a vacuum. When you provide light, the description darkness no longer applies. We have now completed the mechanics of light and its absence in the domain of optics. We understand what darkness is, nothing. What light is, something. How shadows form, interception, not projection. And why darkness feels like presence, because absence affects us, though it is not there. But a larger question now emerges. Is this principle confined to optics, or does it extend further? If darkness is the absence of light, is cold the absence of heat? Is silence the absence of sound? Is ignorance the absence of knowledge? Is despair the absence of hope? If so, then we have discovered not an optical curiosity, but an ontological truth, a principle about the structure of reality itself. We must investigate. We have spent 5 chapters establishing a principle about light and darkness. Light exists, darkness does not. Light is something, darkness is nothing. All phenomena attributed to darkness are, upon analysis, phenomena of light. All operations that seem to affect darkness are operations upon light. But here is where most inquiries stop too soon. They treat this as a curiosity about optics, an interesting fact about light and shadow, perhaps useful for painters and philosophers, but confined to that domain. They fail to ask the deeper question, does this principle extend beyond light? It does, and the extension transforms a lesson about optics into a lesson about existence itself. Consider cold. You believe cold is something, a presence that enters when you open a door in winter, a force that penetrates your clothing, a substance that fills refrigerated spaces. You speak of cold as you speak of darkness. It comes in, it seeps through, it fills the room. Apply the diagnostic we developed for darkness. Can you project cold? Can you emit it from a source? Can you measure it directly, or only measure the absence of its opposite? You cannot add cold to water. You can only remove heat. The ice house does not generate cold. It prevents heat from entering. The winter wind does not carry cold toward you. It carries heat away from you. When you touch ice and feel cold entering your hand, heat is leaving your hand, flowing from the warmer to the cooler body. The sensation is real. The interpretation is backwards. There is no cold substance. There is no cold force. There is only heat, which exists, which can be measured, which obeys laws, and the absence of heat, which we name cold. Cold is the darkness of temperature. Consider silence. You believe silence is something, a presence that falls over a room when conversation ceases, a quality that fills libraries and cathedrals, a substance you can almost touch in a quiet forest at dawn. Apply the diagnostic. Can you project silence? Can you emit it from a device? Can you measure silence directly, or only measure the absence of sound? You cannot add silence to a noisy room. You can only reduce sound. There is no silence emitter that broadcasts quietude the way a speaker broadcasts noise. When you soundproof a room, you do not inject silence. You prevent sound from entering. When the orchestra ceases playing, silence does not arrive from the wings. Sound simply stops being produced. There is no silence substance. There is only sound, which exists, which can be measured, which obeys laws, and the absence of sound, which we name silence. Silence is the darkness of acoustics. Consider ignorance. You believe ignorance is something, a presence in the mind, a substance that plagues students, a force that holds back progress. You speak of depths of ignorance, masses of ignorance, fighting ignorance. Apply the diagnostic. Can you project ignorance? Can you inject it into a mind? Can you measure ignorance directly, or only measure the absence of knowledge? The student does not arrive at school carrying ignorance as a substance to be extracted. His mind lacks certain illuminations. It does not contain anti-illuminations. Education does not remove ignorance. Education provides knowledge. Where knowledge arrives, the description ignorance no longer applies, not because ignorance was defeated, but because it was never anything to defeat. There is no ignorant substance. There is only knowledge, which exists, which can be communicated, which obeys principles, and the absence of knowledge, which we name ignorance. Ignorance is the darkness of the mind, from which it appears that a universal pattern operates across domains. In every case where common thought assumes a pair of opposites, careful analysis reveals asymmetry. One term of the pair denotes presence, something real, measurable, manipulable. The other term denotes merely the absence of that presence, nothing real, nothing measurable, nothing manipulable, except by providing its opposite: light and darkness, heat and cold, sound and silence, knowledge and ignorance, motion and rest. The pattern repeats. This is not wordplay. This is ontology, the study of what exists, and the finding is stark. Reality consists of presences. What we call their opposites are merely absences of those presences, named for convenience, but possessing no being of their own. The practical consequence is revolutionary. In every domain, all effective action involves providing presence, not fighting absence. You cannot combat cold by attacking it. Cold is not there to attack. You can only supply heat. Install a furnace, build a fire, add insulation. Each operation works by providing or preserving heat, not by removing cold. You cannot combat silence by fighting it. Silence is not there to fight. You can only supply sound. Speak, play music, ring bells. Each operation works by providing sound, not by extracting silence. You cannot combat ignorance by battling it. Ignorance is not there to battle. You can only supply knowledge. Teach, explain, demonstrate. Each operation works by providing understanding, not by defeating non-understanding. The reformer who vows to eliminate poverty rarely succeeds if she conceives poverty as enemy to be conquered. But the reformer who provides opportunity, resources, education, connection, who supplies the presences whose absence constitutes poverty, may transform communities. The moralist who catalogues sins produces no virtue. The mentor who demonstrates virtue produces disciples. The philosopher who maps ignorance extends no knowledge. The teacher who provides illumination dispels ignorance automatically. The pattern is universal. Provision succeeds. Combat against absence fails. You may object. Surely some negative terms denote real things. Disease, for instance, seems to be a presence, a malfunction, an invasion, a disorder with real effects. This objection is fair, and it cautions us against mechanical application of the principle. Not every negative term is pure absence. Disease involves real presences, invading organisms, malfunctioning processes, disordered cells. Pain is not absence, but presence, a signal, an experience, a phenomenon. The principle guides inquiry. It does not replace it. In each case, we must determine through examination whether we face a genuine presence requiring modification or an absence requiring provision. The diagnostic helps. Can I act upon this directly, or must I act upon something else? The answer reveals the ontology. But where the diagnostic reveals absence, the principle holds absolutely. You cannot fight nothing. You can only provide something. And the something you provide will determine what remains. Notice throughout your day how you speak of absences as presences. The cold came in when I opened the window. No, heat departed. Silence descended over the crowd. No, sound ceased. Ignorance plagues that student. No, knowledge has not yet been provided. Darkness gathered in the corners. No, light does not reach there. Begin correcting your language. The correction seems pedantic at first, but it is not mere pedantry. Language shapes thought, and thought shapes action. When you speak of absences as presences, you prepare yourself to fight them as presences. When you speak correctly, acknowledging absence as absence, you prepare yourself to provide the corresponding presence. The shift in language precedes the shift in perception. The shift in perception precedes the shift in action. The shift in action produces results. Speak accurately, and you will begin to think accurately. Think accurately, and you will begin to act effectively. We have unified the principle across physical domains: light, heat, sound. We have extended it to knowledge and ignorance. But the most challenging question remains: does the principle extend to human affairs beyond mere knowledge, to emotion, relationship, character? Is hatred perhaps the absence of understanding? Is despair the absence of hope? Is emptiness the absence of meaning? If so, then the entire landscape of human struggle must be reconceived. We approach now the most delicate extension of our principle. In the realm of physics, the distinction between presence and absence is relatively clear. Light can be measured with instruments. Darkness cannot. Heat can be quantified with thermometers. Cold cannot. Sound can be recorded and analyzed. Silence cannot. The asymmetry is demonstrable. In the realm of human experience, emotion, relationship, character, the distinction grows subtle. We must proceed with appropriate caution, applying the principle as guide for inquiry rather than as mechanical formula. Yet the inquiry is worth pursuing, for if the principle holds even partially in human affairs, its practical implications are enormous. Consider the teacher facing a classroom of uninformed students. One approach: identify everything students don't know. Catalogue their ignorance. Test for gaps. Focus attention on deficiencies. Attack ignorance as enemy. Another approach: identify what students might learn. Provide illumination. Offer knowledge. Let provision accomplish what attack cannot. Both teachers work hard. Both care about their students. But only the second operates upon what actually exists. The first teacher exhausts himself wrestling with absence. He cannot extract ignorance from minds because there is no ignorant substance to extract. His tests reveal gaps, but revealing gaps does not fill them. His focus on deficiency produces discouragement without producing knowledge. The second teacher provides what is needed. Each lesson is a candle brought into darkness. Each explanation is light reaching where light was absent. The ignorance does not resist or fight back. It was never there to resist. It simply ceases to be the correct description as knowledge arrives, from which it appears fighting ignorance is category error. Providing knowledge is correct action. The first wastes effort on phantom combat. The second accomplishes transformation through provision. Now consider hatred. The common approach treats hatred as substance, a thing residing in hearts, a poison to be extracted, a disease to be cured. We speak of fighting hatred, combating hatred, rooting out hatred. But what if hatred is better understood as absence? Specifically, what if hatred is the absence of understanding, the absence of the knowledge that would prevent hatred if it were present? Examine this hypothesis. When you understand another person, truly understand their circumstances, their fears, their reasoning, their humanity, can you hate them in the same way? Understanding does not guarantee agreement or approval, but it fundamentally alters the relationship. Hatred flourishes in ignorance of the hated. It withers when understanding arrives. If so, then combating hatred directly may be as futile as fighting shadow. The effort encounters nothing to push against, but providing understanding may accomplish transformation, not by defeating hatred as enemy, but by supplying what its absence lacked. This is hypothesis, not certainty. We do not claim emotions are made of particles. The parallel is structural, not material, but the principle suggests a direction of inquiry. When facing hatred, ask not, how do I defeat this enemy? But what understanding, if provided, would dissolve this absence? Consider despair. Despair feels substantial, a weight upon the chest, a presence filling every moment, a darkness so thick you could cut it with a knife. Surely such vivid experience indicates something real? But recall our analysis of darkness itself. The feeling was real. Its interpretation was erroneous. The experience was coherent. Its object was miscategorized. What if despair is absence? Specifically, the absence of hope that would dispel it if hope were present. The despairing person has lost something. The capacity to envision positive futures. The belief that effort can produce improvement. The trust that tomorrow might differ from today. Despair is not the presence of dark substance, but the absence of illuminating possibility. If so, then telling the despairing to fight their despair may exhaust them further. They are asked to combat nothing with effort, and their effort encounters nothing to grip. But providing genuine grounds for hope, actual possibilities, real reasons for trust, demonstrated paths to improvement, may accomplish what combat cannot. Again, this is direction for inquiry, not dogmatic claim. Not every case of despair is pure absence. Some involve genuine presences that must be addressed. Trauma, injury, chemical imbalance. The principle guides investigation. It does not replace it. But where absence is identified, the remedy is provision, not combat. Consider emptiness, that peculiar modern affliction that seems to plague prosperous societies. People who possess material abundance report feeling empty, hollow, lacking something they cannot name. They have comforts their ancestors could not imagine, yet they feel a void at the center of their lives. What is this emptiness? Is it a presence, some substance that has invaded and hollowed them out? Or is it an absence, the lack of meaning, purpose, connection that their ancestors possessed despite material poverty? The evidence suggests absence. The empty person does not contain something that must be removed. The empty person lacks something that must be provided. Meaning is not absence. Meaning is presence. Purpose is not absence. Purpose is presence. Connection is not absence. Connection is presence. What we call emptiness is the condition when these presences have not arrived, whence it follows that treating emptiness as disease to be cured may fail. There is no emptiness substance to excise, but providing meaning, purpose, connection, providing the presences whose absence constitutes emptiness, may accomplish transformation. The implications for how we counsel the struggling, educate the young, and structure communities are profound. We have been building shelters against non-existent enemies when we should have been providing the light, warmth, and nourishment that actually sustain. A word of caution is warranted. The principle is powerful, but not omniscient. Not every negative state is pure absence. Anger, for instance, is not absence, but presence. A real energy requiring expression or redirection. Pain is not absence, but presence. A signal, a sensation, a phenomenon. Do not apply the principle mechanically without judgment. In each case, ask, is this a presence requiring modification or an absence requiring provision? Use the diagnostic. Can I act upon this directly, or must I act upon something else? Where you find presence, address the presence. Where you find absence, provide the corresponding presence. The principle tells you which question to ask. Your judgment must supply the answer in each particular case. We have now extended the principle as far as it can responsibly reach. We understand its application in physics, light and darkness, heat and cold, sound and silence. We understand its application in knowledge, education as provision, not combat. We understand its tentative application in human affairs, hatred, despair, emptiness as potential absences requiring provision of their positive counterparts. But intellectual understanding is not yet transformed perception. What changes when you see the world this way permanently? What becomes possible that was impossible before? How does one live as a provider of presences rather than a fighter of absences? We must complete the journey by embodying the wisdom, not merely grasping it. We arrive now at the practical promise of everything we have learned. You have spent energy, perhaps tremendous energy, fighting darkness in various forms. You have fought ignorance in students without providing knowledge and wondered why they remained ignorant. You have fought hatred in adversaries without providing understanding and wondered why hatred persisted. You have fought despair in yourself or others without providing hope and wondered why the darkness would not lift. Each battle was exhausting, each battle was heroic in appearance, and each battle was wasted on emptiness. This is not accusation, it is diagnosis. The error was natural. Everyone commits it. Our language, our culture, our instincts all conspire to make absence feel like presence. We see the shadow and prepare for combat against an enemy that does not exist. But now you know, and knowing transforms everything. When you cease fighting what does not exist, tremendous energy becomes available. Consider how much effort you have expended in phantom combat, the anxiety of defending against shadows, the strain of pushing against nothing, the frustration of struggling without result, the exhaustion of vigilance against enemies that cannot attack. This energy was real. The effort was genuine, but it encountered nothing, accomplished nothing, transformed nothing. Now redirect that energy. Instead of fighting darkness, provide light. Instead of combating ignorance, supply knowledge. Instead of battling cold, furnish heat. Instead of struggling against absence, deliver presence. The same energy, differently directed, produces categorically different outcomes. This is not motivation. It is mechanics. The physics is simple. You cannot accelerate nothing, but you can provide something. You cannot transform nothing, but you can furnish something that transforms the situation. The effort remains, the direction changes, and suddenly effort produces result. Consider the candle brought into a dark cellar. At no point does the candle fight. At no point does the candle struggle against darkness, overcome resistance, or defeat an enemy. The candle simply shines. It provides what was absent, and the provision accomplishes what combat never could. There is no battle because there is no enemy. The darkness was never there. Only the absence of light was there. When light arrives, the absence, which was never anything but absence, ceases to be the correct description. We do not say, the candle defeated darkness. We say, the candle provided light. The grammar matters because it reflects reality. This becomes the model for all action. Not combat, but provision. Not opposition, but contribution. Not fighting darkness, but carrying light. The warrior mentality says, I will defeat my enemy. But when the enemy does not exist, the warrior exhausts himself swinging at shadows. The provider mentality says, I will furnish what is needed. And furnishing what is needed actually works, because needs are real and provision is possible. The shift from warrior to provider is not weakness. Provision can demand tremendous effort, courage, sacrifice. Lighting a candle requires obtaining the candle, striking the flame, carrying it into the dark. Teaching knowledge requires acquiring understanding, developing skill, maintaining patience. Providing hope requires finding genuine grounds for hope, communicating them effectively, sustaining effort through discouragement. The work is real. The shift is not from action to passivity, but from futile action to effective action. Here is the transformation in its most practical form. Previously, facing any lack, you asked, how do I fight this absence? That question has no answer, because it addresses nothing. It is like asking, what colour is silence? Or, how much does emptiness weigh? The question contains a category error that renders it unanswerable. Now, facing any lack, you ask, what presence, if provided, would dissolve this absence? That question has infinite answers because it addresses reality. There are always presences that can be provided, some easy, some difficult, some immediate, some requiring long preparation. The answers may be challenging to implement, but they exist. The question opens possibility rather than closing it. The shift from unanswerable question to answerable question is the shift from despair to agency. This does not mean all problems become easy. Providing genuine understanding to those who hate requires wisdom, patience, and skill. Providing genuine hope to the despairing requires finding real grounds for hope, which may be scarce. Providing light to certain kinds of darkness requires resources you may not possess. But difficult is not impossible. The question, how do I fight this absence, is impossible to answer correctly. The question, what presence could I provide, is merely difficult, and difficulty can be overcome. Review your current struggles through this lens. Where in your life are you fighting absence? Where have you been mobilizing against what does not exist? In education, are you attacking ignorance or providing knowledge? In relationship, are you fighting distance or providing connection? In community, are you combating dysfunction or providing function? In yourself, are you battling emptiness or providing meaning? For each struggle, identify the corresponding presence. What is the light to this darkness? What is the heat to this cold? What is the sound to this silence? Then ask, what specific act of provision could I perform? Not fight the darkness, but bring a candle. Not combat the cold, but build a fire. Not defeat the silence, but speak. The shift from fighting to providing may feel strange at first. It contradicts years of linguistic habit, cultural training, instinctive response. But once you make the shift, once you genuinely perceive absence as absence and provide presence accordingly, you will wonder how you ever spent so much energy on phantom combat. One clarification is essential. This teaching does not counsel passivity. It does not say, accept darkness, do nothing. It says, do not fight darkness, provide light. The instruction is not to cease acting, but to redirect action. Provision is strenuous. The candle must be lit. The fire must be built. The knowledge must be taught. The understanding must be developed and communicated. The hope must be grounded in reality and shared effectively. None of this happens by wishing. What changes is not the quantity of effort, but its direction. The warrior swinging at shadows exhausts himself without result. The provider carrying light works equally hard, perhaps harder, but accomplishes transformation. Do not use this teaching as excuse for inaction. Use it as guide for effective action. We approach the end of our journey. One chapter remains, to integrate all we have learned and to point beyond it, toward the ocean of truth that stretches infinite before us. What does it mean to carry this understanding permanently? What does it mean to become, in essence, a carrier of light? Return with me now to where we began, a cellar beneath the house, stairs descending into dimness. A man steps down, one hand on the rough stone wall, feeling his way as light recedes behind him. He reaches the bottom and stands in what he perceives as darkness. It is dark in here, he says, or perhaps only thinks. The darkness seems thick, substantial, pressing against his eyes. But now you know what he truly observes. No darkness fills that cellar. Nothing presses against him. Nothing has substance, or weight, or presence. The cellar simply contains no light. His eyes receive no stimulus because there is no stimulus to receive. The darkness is not a thing, it is the absence of a thing. The cellar is not full, it is empty, empty of illumination. He strikes a match, he lights a candle. Does the candle defeat the darkness? Does it drive back the shadow? Does it overcome an enemy? None of these descriptions apply because there is no darkness to defeat, no shadow to drive back, no enemy to overcome. The candle simply provides what was absent. It shines, and where light now exists, the description darkness no longer applies. Not because darkness was conquered, but because it was never there to conquer. The candle did not fight, it merely shone. And in shining, it accomplished what no amount of fighting could ever accomplish. This is the image I leave with you. The candle that does not fight, that simply shines. You have understood a principle, but principles must be embodied to become transformative. Let this image become your model, where you encounter absence, in understanding, in connection, in hope, in knowledge. Do not mobilize for war. There is no enemy. Do not fortify your defenses. There is nothing to defend against. Do not exhaust yourself in combat. Combat against nothing produces only exhaustion. Instead, carry light. Ask, what presence could I provide? What illumination could I offer? What warmth? What sound? What meaning? What understanding? What hope could I furnish to this space where furnishing is needed? Then provide it. Simply shine. The candle does not concern itself with the darkness. The candle concerns itself with burning, with producing light, with maintaining flame, with being what a candle is. The darkness takes care of itself, or rather, it takes care of nothing, because it is nothing. Be the candle. Concern yourself with producing light. Let the darkness dissolve, not through your opposition, but through your provision. Yet let us not mistake completion of one inquiry for mastery of all truth. A shore stretches before us, vast and complex. We have examined one pebble, the truth about darkness and light, absence and presence. We have found it smooth, beautiful, illuminating. It has taught us something genuine about the structure of reality. But the ocean of truth extends beyond sight. What other pairs that seem like opposites conceal the same asymmetry? What other absences have we mistaken for presences, wasting effort in phantom combat? What other provisions await us, capable of transforming situations that combat could never change? These questions remain for further inquiry. We have learned a method, the diagnostic of direct action, the distinction between presence and absence, the redirection from combat to provision. This method can be applied to questions we have not yet asked. The completion of this investigation is the commencement of the next, and yet, within its scope, the teaching is complete. Darkness has no being. It is the name for an absence. You cannot project it, fight it, or fear it rationally, for there is nothing to project, nothing to fight, nothing to fear. Light has being. It is a reality that exists, travels, obeys law, carries colour, enables sight. You can produce it, direct it, measure it, provide it. The universe is not divided between two equal kingdoms, the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness, locked in eternal struggle. There is only one kingdom, the kingdom of what exists. Within it, light travels where light is produced and directed. Outside the reach of light, we perceive nothing, and we call this nothing darkness. No warfare between light and darkness is possible, because warfare requires two combatants. There is only one combatant, light. And light does not fight, it shines. What changes when you see the world this way? Fear transmutes into purpose. The child fears darkness and seeks to avoid it. The wise mind desires light and seeks to provide it. These orientations may produce identical actions in some moments, but they produce entirely different lives over time. Fear is defensive, constrictive, exhausting. Desire is expansive, generative, energizing. The person who flees darkness and the person who carries light may walk the same path, but one is hunted and the other is hunting. Despair transmutes into possibility. When every deficiency was an enemy to defeat, many deficiencies seemed insurmountable. How do you defeat absence? You cannot. But when every deficiency becomes a vacuum to fill, possibility opens everywhere. Vacuums can be filled. Absences can receive presences. The question, what can I provide, always has answers, even when those answers require tremendous effort to implement. Exhaustion transmutes into effectiveness. The effort you once wasted on phantom combat now accomplishes real transformation. The same energy, redirected, produces results. You discover that you were never weak. You were merely misdirected. Properly aimed, your capacity to provide light is greater than you knew. I do not claim that this understanding solves all problems. Some problems involve genuine presences that must be modified. Injuries, diseases, aggressors, obstacles. The principle does not say treat everything as absence. It says distinguish between presence and absence and address each appropriately. but where you find absence, and you will find it more often than you expect, the prescription is clear. Provide the corresponding presence. Do not fight what is not there. Furnish what is needed. As you leave this inquiry, carry the candle. Wherever you go, there will be darkness, spaces where light has not yet arrived, minds where understanding is absent, hearts where hope has not been kindled. Do not be dismayed by the darkness. It is not enemy, it is invitation. Every dark space invites provision. Every absence calls for presence. Every vacuum awaits filling. You are not a warrior against an overwhelming foe. You are a provider to an unlimited need. The difference is not subtle. It is total. Warriors can be defeated. Providers can only be exhausted. And exhaustion is addressed not by fighting harder, but by resting and returning. Warriors require enemies. Providers require only need. And need is everywhere. One final image. The stars burn in the void, separated by distances so vast the mind recoils from contemplation. Between them, what exists? Nothing. The darkness between stars is not a substance separating them. It is simply where their light has not reached, or has not yet reached. Given the finite speed of light and the infinite ages required to cross such gulfs, the cosmos is not half light and half darkness, locked in struggle. The cosmos is light extended variably, reaching where it can reach, with darkness merely naming where it has not arrived. And yet, and this is wonder, not despair, the light continues to travel. Every moment, the reach of every star extends further into the void. The boundary of illumination advances, not by fighting darkness, but by the simple continued act of shining. This is the structure of reality. This is the nature of provision. This is the truth about darkness. Light is something. Darkness is nothing. You cannot project nothing, fight nothing, or fear nothing rationally. You can only provide something, and the something you provide will determine what remains.